Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, back again on the workbench. And today we're going to take on a Shimano bait runner. This one is the bait runner 6000 OC. It's a modern day version of the classic bait runner with the square frame. This one's in for a tune-up, so we're going to tune it up. We'll show you how this thing comes together, the mechanics inside of it, where to lube it, and tell you a little bit about the reel as we go along. So I like to start by taking the reel apart. To do that, I remove the handle. The handle removes in a clockwise fashion. And once it's removed, I put it into my parts tray. I always use a parts tray. In this case, it's just the bottom of a milk jug, but I use that as a central repository for all the pieces and parts I take off. That way I know where to find them when I go to reinstall the reel. So I'm going to grab the spool with the drag knob adjuster. We're going to put that spool in the same parts tray, and then I'm going to come over and take off the little click rotor and the shim washers so that I can remove the rotor. You do that simply by pulling up on it back into the parts tray. Now, to remove the rotor, we want to take the set screw out, which holds the rotor screw in place. That's a Phillips head, so just grab that. And you'll notice that I have try to keep my workbench pretty clear so that if a piece falls on it, it's right in front of me. And if the piece bounces a little bit, I can kind of grab it in the area. So next up then would be removing the rotor nut. That's a 12mm nut. And I keep my wrenches pretty close at hand, just so that I can hold the reel I'm working on and reach into my basket to do that. My tray has both the standard version and the metric versions of these, and those are meant to service both conventional reels, spinning reels, and reels made in the US and reels made abroad. Okay, with that out, then we can get to the body. I'm going to take the trip mechanism off first for the bait feeder function. To do that, there's two screws. One is a small, one is a large. And this is a good time to tell you if you're working on one of these, you don't know the reel, and want to make sure that you get it set properly on the way back, take pictures. Take it on a cell phone, take it on a digital camera, take it on a video camera like we're doing here, but take pictures along the way. That'll tell you the sequence of the pieces and parts that you've removed and also where they came from. So if you're ever in question there in terms of the way to put them back together, the best way to do it is really to go back and reference your pictures and where you took them out. Okay, with that then you separate this. And once you separate the pieces, well, I don't have to take the one off that side. But separate the pieces, and again, into the parts tray is always a good idea. I'm actually going to use two parts trays here as we move along. Next off then would be the case. Those again are Phillips head screws. So keep a variety of screwdrivers as well. This one's a smaller tipped Phillips head. I have a broader tipped one. I also have a series of flat bladed screwdrivers as well. Make sure you use the one that fits the screw. If you use one that's a smaller one like this and a broad screw, you risk tearing up the notches. And if you have a broad one where a smaller one is involved, either rounding the screw or not being able to take it out efficiently. So always keep those around and keep them within reach as well. I'm laying the four of these out because I want to make sure that the screws are the same size. And as I suspected, one of them is not. It's the one that belongs below here. So you always want to make sure that as you take these off, you notice where they came from so that you can put them back in properly. Okay, with that then, we should just checking to make sure that there's not another screw. Sometimes Shimano hides a screw up here in the handle. But on this one, I don't believe that's the case. So let's just see if we can't remove that. Here we go. We'll remove that. we have a bearing. This is a 3-ball bearing reel, so it has a ball bearing here and on the other side of the main drive. Then it has a ball bearing up top here. It has an anti-reverse gear. It's both capable of mono and braid. It can handle up to 65-pound braids, so you can tell you that it's meant for fairly large fish. And it has 20 pounds of max drag, so that's a nice setup all around on that. Okay, I like to take the bottom. Continue with the disassembly of this reel. We're going to take the bait feeder trip mechanisms off. That's held in by 2 Phillips head screws, 1 on each side, and it sits on a connector point here. Now, this is a spring-loaded piece. I like to keep it in a single assembly when I am just tuning up a reel. There's no real need to take this apart into its multiple pieces, but you do need to know how it comes in and goes out. And if it does trip, then you do know that, or you do need to know that the function behind it in terms of the spring and that. So with those 2 there, we should be able to gently pry that off the posts. And what we just saw here was one of those spring loads. This trip mechanism that hides on the gear rides on the post down here, and that just came off. And now there's another post over on this side, and we should be able to remove it then. So this is the trip mechanism I'm referring to, and you need to make sure, and again, if you took the pictures, you would notice that this little post here belongs on the trip lever mechanism over here. So again, mental notes to that, and into my parts basket. Once we're in that, we can take off the center shaft. I'm just going to rotate it down so that I have access to the set screw here. That'll enable me to take out the axle shaft. Now, this is a little clip. So what I like to do is just kind of remove that. And again, parts tray, particularly on the small ones, and then we should be able to pull up on this clip like so. And once we pull it up, we can remove that clip. It's a double C clip. Just make sure you're paying attention. Once we do that, then we can remove the axle shaft. Check it to be clean. The cross wind block. And then we can pull the main gear out. And in this case, the bearing came with the main gear, but that's okay. So this reel is clean inside. There's not much we need to do here. I'll pull out the crosswind gear as well. Should be able to get it just by grabbing the stud. There we go. And we'll just make sure that we've got it oiled and lubed and ready to go back to service here. There's plenty of grease. It doesn't appear as though there's any damage whatsoever. It looks like it's just in for its normal service. You want to check the teeth on both sides of the gear. Check underneath to make sure it's all clean, and this one's very clean. Check the functioning on the drag itself, which is working fine. Okay, and then just want to oil. I use a Real X oil on this. We're going to oil the bearing, oil the moving parts, and then we're just going to lube the internal gearing. Just looking for my little screwdriver. Oh, here's my bigger one. I'm going to grab that, and we're going to throw some grease onto the back of the crosswind block. We're kind of working opposite the way we came in, or took them out. Crosswind block then goes in. You want to put the stud down low on the crosswind block so that when you go to reseat the crosswind gear, when you go to reseat the block, it's hanging low, which means it's easier for you to reinstall the axle. Go ahead and put that back in. Now we can put the main gear in. You had to take the axle out in order to get the main gear out, because the axle rides between the two, and if you were to try and pull the main gear out, you would only be bumping the axle. You can't get it out that way. Okay, we've checked that. We're going to put a little bit of lube onto the one side of the main gear. We're going to seat that into the... Before we do that, let's get a little bit more of the lubrication up top on the pinion gear. And there's no indication that there's any issues whatsoever with the anti-reverse or the lube there. So I'm just going to grab my oil and I'm going to oil the bearing. There's a bearing up there. I'll come in from underneath, and then I'll put one on a sleeve up top there, and that's sufficient for just a general tune-up, so we don't have to worry about that. And then what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll reseat the axle gear next. We'll just axle shaft. We want to just clean that up. Again, a little bit of lubrication on there. I have a latex glove on my hand. If you want to just kind of use that, it's a protective, but you can spread the grease around that way without getting it all over your hands. And then we'll just reseat that into the lower drag assembly. And once we get the alignment correct, we can come back in now and set the little holding pins. That's the double clamp there. And you need to align that with the grooves in the axle shaft. And once those are aligned, you can flip it back, and now we have that where we can put the that small screw that we took out. So I'm going to grab a micro screwdriver for that. Again, try to keep everything close at hand. You grab the micro screwdriver and that little screw that belongs there. Hopefully we'll have some luck putting this back in without causing any trauma. There we go. So that screws back in, holding the piece in place. Put this back in while I'm at it. Okay, and then all we have to do is reset that spring assembly. Now, if this thing had popped, you'll notice that there's only a little spring on this one post holding the secondary piece. There's two pieces together. This little post is going to go on this shaft. There's two centering posts on the others. One down here, and the other one is up here, and those two need to make sure that they're centered as well. So resetting this. Just take your time with these. Once you take your time and you kind of master it, it's a little bit easier the second time and the third time around. But just take your time. You'll notice that if it's set right. What I'm working on right now is just getting these little studs to line up. I'm not quite on that stud up on top, but I'm lined up otherwise. And you'll notice I'm working with a little pin here. And that pin has always been pretty helpful to me. Okay, I think we're on there. We're lined up with our holes. We're on the pin. So now all we have to do is take those two screws and reset them. And those of you that watch this video know that I have a little bit of trouble with small screws, but we should be on our way now. Yep, thought so. I'm trying to hold the other assembly from not springing back, and that's what's causing a little bit of this. Okay, now I got it. So it just took a little while there, but patience is the virtue in this case. Let's go grab the other one of these. All right, so we're back to where we started. With the assembly. And I've moved this assembly up to trip mode, and what will happen is as we go and we turn, we're going to kick that back now, and that resets the assembly. So that's basically how to service the lower end of this reel. I'm just going to grab a little bit more of the grease and we'll just throw it onto the opposing shaft. Grab the side plate here. We know we had the two shims that are sitting on here. Or it's one shim. We can put that back on over the gear shaft. We have the bearing, so let's flood the bearing with oil. And we can reset the case. And that's always a nice sound to hear when that case snaps into place. Then we have the 4 screws for the case. So a lot of folks ask, can we use a mechanical screwdriver, a power screwdriver? And I know a lot of folks that do it, particularly if they do a lot of them, particularly if they have trouble with their hands. But I simply don't recommend it. It's just something that, to me, there's more risk than reward associated with it. And that's because these cases have flex in them, and those drivers have an awful lot of torque in them. And what will happen is you'll find yourself in a situation where you can cause that case to bind. And if it binds, there's trouble in the operation of the reel. So I don't recommend it. This is where the small screw goes. It goes on this back corner here. And then we just grab the assembly for the trip. Remember, we had this little piece that ran in between here. Just follow the kind of the outline there. And then this one goes on top. And it seats over the clip. And then into the other part of the assembly there. And I find that the best thing to do first is to attach that larger screw on the bottom. And then put the smaller screw up top. That way it's kind of held in place and doing the right thing. So there's really nothing to fear with the bait feeders. So we just want to put that last one in. And if you're careful and methodical about the way that you take it apart, you take the pictures along the way, and you just have patience when you're working on that spring mechanism, then it's not unlike any other reel that you're servicing once you get underneath the covers there. So we should be good to go on this one. Let's grab that handle. And then the parts tray is a nice place to hold everything so that you know where you're going. We've already thrown some oil up top there, so we really don't need to do too much there. We've got a nice smooth operating reel here, so the next thing to do then is put the rotor back on. And the rotor screw goes on. Now, some of these screws are threaded reverse, so that instead of tightening clockwise and loosening counterclockwise, it's the opposite. Just pay attention to that when you take it off so you know how to put it back together. In this case, this is a traditional right side tightening to a clockwise, so there's no issue with that. And again, this is a 12 millimeter nut. And once you set that, then you'll have that little hole there for the set screw. I use my micro driver on this. Sometimes it just helps me to steady the screw as I'm trying to put it into the thing, at least to get it started, and then I can come over with the regular driver. Okay, while we have it here, we're going to do a quick shot on the line roller. I like to put a drop or two inside of each of these bail connection points as well. Give it a spin. It's a nice driver. And then we're going to come up top and we're going to service this drag. And then we'll be done with the reel. So again, this was a clean reel. We didn't need to do too much, but it was worth taking apart, showing you how it works, cleaning it up, putting it back together again. Now you can see there's some contamination on the top. That's because these top drive reels are always the ones that are taking the brunt. So you want to make sure in your annual service that you come in and clean this up. The easy way to do this one is to just grab a paper towel and make sure that that channel is clear. And then you'll notice there's a series of washers and that metal clip that we just took off there. And you want to make sure that those are they're in line, and you note on the stack. Now these are felt washers. So felt washers don't really get anything. This is pretty much factory lube. As long as they stay flexible and are not dirty, you don't really need to do too much with them. I recommend oiling them. I wouldn't put drag grease on them. Okay, then you're going to get a round one after the first felt. You'll put the second felt one in, and then you should have a keyed washer. The keyed washer has the at least 1 point on it in this case. That's going to go in the channel in the spool. The last of the felt washers, and again, you can put some oil on there. You really just want to keep them moist, and then that last one, and then the spring. Now there's a groove in here that spring rides in. You want to just make sure it's properly seated. And again, the operative word here is it's a spring. So get that thing set and hold it there, because you want to make sure that it doesn't shoot, and you have one of those moments where you're out there searching for where did it go in your shop. Another reason to keep the tables clean. So these are properly seated, and that spring, the only function of that is to keep those drags in place. Oops, looking into my parts bucket, it tells me I forgot that last little collar, which is the click rotor and the shim washers. So let's put that in. Now we can put the spool on, and we can put the tensioner knob on, and this reel's ready to go fishing again. So it takes a while, takes some patience, takes a little bit of effort, but you want to make sure that at the end of the day that you're ready to go again. We can do that, and then we're going to just test the bottom drag system while we're at it. The bait feeder function. So as we load the bait feeder out through flipping that, all right, we're on easy there. Just want to tighten that up. All right, we're getting done what we need to get done. All right, and then we're pretty much locked down for the max drag kind of thing on the bait feeder. So this one's ready to go fishing again. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I apologize if there were any rough spots in there, but I try to show you it as I do it in my shop, and to teach you how to do these yourself so that you can keep these reels out there fishing. So with that, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like it. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Thanks again.